Thokozani.
Thokoza mkhulu.
Thokozani ngixolise Makhehla ukuba late nyana. I truly apologize. Mkhulu Mhleli, your mic.
Oh, nxa mkhulu. Bengithi mina ngicela ukuthi ke mkhulu ngiya-broadcasta manje then bese ke uyaqala uyasiphahlela mkhulu.
Okay.
Thokoza mkhulu.
Thokozini. Ukuba late nyana. I truly apologize.
Okay, mkhulu, you are on. You may continue.
Mkhulu Mhleli, your mic. Oh, nxa mkhulu. Bengithi mina ngicela ukuthi ke mkhulu ngiya-broadcasta manje then bese ke
Qhubeka mkhulu.
Oh, Thokoza, are we on?
We are on mkhulu.
Oh, okay. Thokozini Makhehla Hotel. Nina bendlu emnyama. Nina baka nomkhubulwane nomvelinqangi. Sithi ama at nomkhubulwane. Thokozani Ndlovu. Siyabonga kakhulu, sibonga ithuba esibenalo. Just to be aligned, we give thanks to Mvelinqangi noNomkhubulwane for making us animate. Sikhona ukwenza konke. Manje ke namhlanje sizokhuluma ngaleyo nkulumo, that discussion which brings a lot of confusion amongst Africans in general, because after we were colonized, we're then confused about so many things because so many foreign concepts, especially about the Creator, were brought and instilled in the minds of Africans. So we thought, today with Indlovukazi, we would, then, see xazulule, this, concept, just to give a perspective, an African perspective of the Creator principles that Okoko were to knew. Because in the African spirituality, you don't just believe. Belief comes after you have confirmed certain facts. So in the African spirituality, we don't believe, but that belief is brought after we've done our own independent scientific truth about what we are told. So our ancestors, Okoko were never confused about the Creator, principles, in our universe, in our solar system. They knew that Umvelinqangi, the first cause, which is, Umvelinqangi, the first cause, we call in ancient times Okoko called Atum. The emergence of light from Nun. Now we want to look at, these Creator, principles, which was first created before anything else on earth was created. What is this Creator God? Abelungu bafike bathi God, but thina simazi as uQamatha, Umvelinqangi, Ramasedi. Manje we've requested Indlovukazi uGogo Rutendo ukuthi asincedise mesihamba, as we journey through, the understanding of, the perspective of our ancestors with regard to the Creator, principles. So, Gogo, ukhululekile sizoloko sifaka imibuzo lapho nalapho mesingacaciselekanga, but, please, Gogo, go ahead.
Thokozani, thank you so much for inviting me once again, and this time for giving me a very tough topic. But we'll try to embrace it, because ultimately we'll find that we are the topic. So I'd like to just begin by playing an audio, and I hope this audio will start to incite our minds into what the topic actually is about.
My friends, my story must here end, that others may continue it, maybe in future years, the God's willing. But let me, here and now, in the name of the light, in the name of the dweller on the doorway, in the name of the commander of the seas and the skies, in the name of the empress of the stars, in the name of the one, the living, the mother, let me give my blessings to all of you. May the light accompany you as you walk across the plains of this world. May the truth be the star that shines not only above your heads, but deep within the kernels of your souls. May peace, the most fragrant of flowers, attend you no matter where you go. May food never be lacking in your village. May water never be lacking in your streams and rivers. May love never be lacking in your hearts and in the hearts of your children. May your beds always be fruitful and friendly. May love always be with you to the ending of your days. May war be away from the borders of your countries. May anger be away from the mountains of your lives. As this thundering millennium draws to its close, may you be protected, shielded, cherished until you see the beginning of the new. Let me sing this last song here, the song of peace that I sang in one troubled night when guns were filling the skies with the wine of bullets, after the government of President Mangobe had been sent tumbling into the dust to be forever forgotten. Masika nye yesibani so utu ula. Masika nye yesibani so utu ula. Masika nye onye masika. Onye yeseba desokotola masika onye masika onye yeseba niso utula Empumalanga entshonala anga yesibani masika onye eningizimu nasenyaka atho yesibani masika onye. My
Thokozani, thank you so much. That was just an introduction, and I believe we all know the voice. It's a voice that we're all familiar with, a voice that has brought us a lot in our lives and who has shared a lot with us. And in that, he was sharing a number of clues into what it is that this concept is that we're talking about today, the concept of God. I'll now share my video, my screen. And I believe last week it was suggested that I switch off my video so that my sound does not get distorted. So I'm just going to attempt to do that. Okay. So we're talking about the African concept of God. What does that mean? And how is it related to the African calendar here on our Decolonization Sundays? We've just heard Unkulu Isanusivu Samazulu Credo Muto talking about the lamp of peace. And what is it that the lamp of peace has to do with the concept of God? Where does a lamp fit in, and where does light fit in, and where does peace fit in the concept of God? Once again, we always go back to these three basic laws: know thyself, as above and so below, and therefore as within and so without. And then yesterday as today, and tomorrow as today. We've spoken about the Nile Meridian, starting all the way down here in Southern Africa, moving up along the 31.14 degrees east line of longitude, reaching up all the way to the Great Pyramid of Giza. We've spoken about where or what is Kemet, the Black nation, the Black land, the place that is Black, the place of Black people. We've said that Kemet is a location, a time, a movement, and a consciousness. But what does Kemet have to do with God? What if God was Kemet? God as the Black nation, God as the Black land, God as Black, and God as Black people? What about God as a location, God as time, God as movement, and God as consciousness? What has this got to do with Kemet? We've spoken, as Nkulu has just talked about, that the disturbance of colonialism, the disturbance of apartheid, the disturbance of slavery, the disturbance upon the continent has also disturbed our understanding of the supreme, has disturbed our understanding of the divine, has disturbed our understanding of God, the Godhead. Because we, in adopting the dominant paradigm, this paradigm that came to us with a gun in one hand and a Bible in another, have seen God in compartments and have stopped seeing God in the totality. Just like the Western paradigm or the dominant paradigm sees life in compartments, sees life in silos, so too has our conception of God being one in compartments, in silos, and not in a totality or as a whole. But we know that just like life is not partitioned, God is not partitioned. And this is what our ancestors would have told us were they here with us today, which we know they are according to African cosmology. So let us deconstruct what we mean when we're speaking about God. What is it that we're actually speaking about? The first thing is I was asked to speak about the concept of God. And the concept, the word concept, therefore, is a bit troubling to me because the minute we start speaking about a concept, it means that we're speaking about God as something that's out there, God as something that can be rationalized or that can be theorized, God as something that is external to me, God as something that is not inherent in who I am, God as something that is far away. And this concept we know is studied in theological colleges, in seminaries, and in all manners of places of worship in which the Western paradigm came into the continent in order to colonize even the way we viewed that which we are. Now, when we come into Africa, God is not a concept. God is not something far away, in a heaven far away, out of reach, unseen, and yet perhaps there are some elements of these concepts or some elements of these manifestations or archetypes that are relevant to the African concept of God or the African I'd rather say experience of God. And therefore, this is what we'd like to touch on today. The experience of God. Who or what or why or when or where is God according to the African paradigm? Who is the creator? Why is the creator? Where or why is the creator? So let me be a bit controversial and say, actually, God is geometrical. God is a circularity and God is a triangularity. And this is a concept that we brought in last week when we were looking at the education system. By the same token, the very same concepts of circularity and triangularity can be attributed to God. What is the circularity of God? We know that as Africans, we have a tendency to build in circles. We have a tendency to sit in circles. We have a tendency to think in circles. We have a tendency to create in circles. We have a tendency to be in circles. Why is this? And what does this have to do with God or our concept of God? Last week, we spoke about the circle and how the circle is the most complete shape, geometrical shape. This shape, if you apply any force upon it, is able to hold the force. And furthermore, if within a circle you divert energy in any direction, it can flow infinitely within the parameters of the circle because it has got infinite number of angles. From a physics point of view, a circle is complete. And therefore, this that is complete is how we as Africans view God, as the completion that is an internal force that is circular and that has got an infinity of energy and therefore an eternity of energy. So when we as Africans speak of God, we speak of one who is infinite and one who is eternal. But we can take this a little bit further. And in the middle of this internal force, we create a centerpiece. And if we saw our first picture where we had a group of people in a lihutla sitting around a central point, which is the tree, bounded by a circle, what is it that they were actually mimicking, or what was the metaphor of their constellation in which they were sitting as they were constellating? In fact, what we see amongst Africans is even in our sitting, even in our meeting, even in our drawing, even in our building, we are always constellating God. Because this internal force with a circle with an internal being within the center is actually what we as Africans know as God. What is it? This is what we call Neter, because that is the symbol of Neter. Neter is what we as Africans know as all that is. It is the name of God or gods. It is the word from which natura derived, and therefore the word from which nature derived. So when we as Africans speak about God, we're actually speaking about nature, not only nature as in that which is around us, everything from the trees to the bees, everything from the rivers, everything from the wind, but also we're talking about the nature of who we are. Our inherent nature is what is God. So Neter, as the circle with the central point, is what we term as God. So God as Neter, there are two realms of being. The first being is what we call the subjective realm, and this is the realm of God. And this subjective realm is the realm of no thingness, not nothing, but no thingness, a place where no thing exists. This is the void, and this void is called Atum. And then we have another realm of being. We have the objective realm. And in this realm, we have what we call consciousness and will, and what we call energy and matter. And in this realm, the being that exists is conscious that it is conscious, but it is also conscious that it can will. And because it is conscious that it can will, it therefore has the impetus to create. And what does it create with? It creates with energy. And what does it create into? It creates into matter. And this is the objective realm that creates the Neter that is God. So there we see that this being, we can say, has a thought. This thought is animated by an emotion, which is an energy in motion. And then this energy in motion is manifested as physical reality. These realms of being are what we as Africans know as Neter, which we know as God. So Neter, or NTR as it is often abbreviated, is the being that synthesizes and pervades life in all realms. It is all that is. The circle with the center point is how we constellate ourselves always as Africans, because what we're constellating is actually our supreme creator. We're constellating God. And if we take it from Neter, from up there in the northern part of our Zeb Tepi, our Nile Meridian, we speak about Neter, but that concept of Neter is also here down in the southern part of our continent. And this Neter manifests itself as Ntu. And Ntu is the causative, dynamic life force or power responsible for all of creation on earth and all of creation in the universe. This Ntu is the subjective matter of the subjective realm of Neter. So when we're speaking about God as Africans, we break it down into what God actually is. It's from Neter to Ntu, moving down Zeb Tepi, the Nile Meridian. So as we've said, Neter is nature, whether it is in the animals, whether it is in the trees, whether it is in the landscape, whether it is in the mountains or the bees, whether it is in the butterflies, whether it is in the water, but also nature as we do not see it, nature that we feel. So nature as in the psychic energy that we're all accustomed to, nature as the way we feel or sense the spirits that abound us, nature as we experience the ancestors, those that have walked before us, nature as we experience those who are yet to come. All of this is what we as Africans call Neter, which is how we experience God. And God exists in many forms, as we see here, and even more forms, together with how we relate. That relation is our relating with the experience of God. It is all encompassing. It includes everything. It is as far above us as it is below. It is as far within as it is without. So when we know ourselves, when we say as above, so below, when we say yesterday as today and tomorrow as today, we're actually speaking about the nature of God, the Neter that is God. And we know that here we then take Ntu, and Ntu moves into Ubuntu, which is our interdependence, our interconnectedness, and our interrelatedness with all that is. This Ubuntu is how we relate to the all being, the supreme being, the Godhead, the divine one, that is our connection to all that is. So Ntu manifests in all things. Ntu is Muntu, as we will know, or Bantu, which is what we are here in the South. And also when we go into Kemet and we look into the DNA of many of those ancient ones who were responsible for civilization, we realize that Bantu DNA exists even in those from Kemet. So when Baba Credo told us that actually those who are up in the northern part of Zeb Tepi, those who came at a later time, because Kemet is a location, is the time, is a consciousness, they actually originated here from where the Bantu have originated here in the cradle of humanity, here, which is also the cradle of life. And so we are Muntu, an aspect of Ntu, an aspect of Neter, which are reasoned beings, a force endowed with intelligence, and includes the living dead, it includes the living, and it includes the unborn. It encompasses all deities. So whether we're talking about Set, or whether we're talking about Ma'at, or whether we're talking about Heru or Ser, or whether we're talking about all the deities, whether we're talking about Nomkubulwan, what Amarava, all of that is encompassed in Muntu. And all of that is an aspect of Neter, which is an aspect of how we as Africans consider God. So Ubuntu is present on Ntu, Neter. God is present in all things that are animate, all things that move and reason with the life force that is Ntu, animated as the subjective realm of Neter. But God exists in all things because we say Neter is all that is. So therefore we also have Kintu, which is Bintu, or unreasoned beings, forces that cannot act for themselves and which become active only on the command of Muntu, which we are. And this includes plants, animals, minerals, and any object of customary usage. But as we know, in many Bantu cultures, trees are actually an aspect of Muntu. They do not fall under Kintu because they serve as the road from which the ancestors are moved from the living into the realms of the eternal. So Ntu moves even in that which does not reason, because even that which does not reason is God, is Neter, is inanimate. We have spoken about Hantu before, that God is actually a time and God is a location. So everywhere we are, this time is a living, breathing manifestation of who or what or where or when God is. God is a when and a where as well. Hantu is the force which localizes every event and motion in space and time. As I've said, it is a where and a when, and God too is a where and a when. And we know that Hantu governs all cycles. So God is cyclical. And we've spoken about cycles in previous times, whether it is the cycles within our body, whether it is the cycles upon the planet, or whether it is the cycles within the cosmos. All of these are manifestations of Neter, or manifestations of God as we as Africans know it. And then Ntu moves to all things as Kuntu, or a modality. So even every emotion that we feel, everything that we perceive, whether it is beauty, whether it is wonder, all of this is an action, is an attribute of what is Neter. Kuntu is a modal force, and this modal force has Ntu running through it. And because it has Ntu running through it, it is also God. So God can be as ugly as God can be beautiful. God can be as fearful as God can be joyful. All of this encapsulates what we as Africans know as the character or nature, Neter, of God. As I say, Ubuntu, Ntu, exists even in that which is intangible, even that which we perceive and are not able to touch as tangible, reasoned beings. But that is also an aspect of God as we as Africans know it. So Untu is an aspect of God. And this is a force in which being and beings coalesce. It is the basic essence that unifies the universe. It is the essence of life. This is God. Ntu, or God, is immanent. It's a spiritual force that is inside, as we saw the circle. It is also transcendent. It is a spiritual force that is outside. It is interrelated and interconnected with all sphere of existence, whether it is Muntu, whether it is Kintu, whether it is Hantu, whether it is Kuntu. It is intrinsic, that it is psychic and immaterial, but it is also extrinsic. It is social and material, and it lives in harmony and balance. But harmony and balance can only exist if there is disharmony and lack of balance. And so Ntu, or God, is forever flowing from balance to imbalance, from harmony to disharmony, because that is how Ntu, or God, exists as we as Africans know, not believe, but know. So God is a contradiction. And why will I say this? Here is what is said by by some of our African elders in the northern part of our continent. In the beginning was God. Today is God. Tomorrow will be God. Who can make an image of God? He or she has no body. He or she is as a word which comes out of your mouth. That word, it is no more. It is past, and it still lives. So is God. So God is a contradiction. God is neither here nor there, yet God is everywhere. God is near, and yet God is far away. God is hidden, and yet God is manifest. God is infinite and eternal, and yet God is nothing, and yet God is everything. God is no thing and everything. What informs this contradiction that we as humans may perceive about God? We see God in the totality. God is the creator or the ultimate source of all existence. God is the true owner of the universe or the multiverse or the cosmos. God is the supreme judge who abhors injustice or evil, discrimination and oppression of the weak. God is the supreme ruler of the universe. But God is also a laughing God. God is a parent, not just a father, but also a mother. God is omnipresent. God is omniscient. God is omnipotent. God is immanent and near to people. Yet God is transcendent and the mysterious one who cannot be fully known or understood. Yet God is perfect, God is pure, and God is holy. God is everlasting and immortal. God is invisible and immaterial. God is the healer, the nganga, the healer of bodies and souls. God is peaceful and is a peacemaker. And God is compassionate, generous, forgiving, caring, and loving. And if we heard what it is that Baba Credo was saying in the audio earlier, this is what he was speaking to as he's speaking of God. So how then do we as Africans continue to experience God? We experience God as Atum Ra. Atum, which is Atem, which is the no thing, the place where nothing exists. But also Ra, the experience where everything exists. So Atum Ra, this contradiction is what God is. God is also Amun Ra, where Amun or Amen is the hidden, and Ra is the manifest. So this contradiction between the hidden and manifest is also what is God. We may talk about God here in the south as Ramasedi, the father of many sons. Why? Because that son is Ra. Ra is the one who is manifest, and Ra is everything. Everything that we exist here on this particular planet. We've spoken about how the sun is hydrogen. All of that is what Ra is, which is what God is. We may speak of God as Mvelkani, the harbinger of origins, the one who creates the creator, the one who exists before all of creation, the one who exists in the time that was before, the place that was before. We may see God as Msikavanu, the creator of all people. We may see God as Ishe Wabantu et Nebintu, the father of human beings, but all things, Muntu and Kintu, Hantu and Bintu and Kuntu. So God, as we as Africans know it, is the universal creator, the multiversal creator, the one who creates everything, including itself, himself, or herself. And so when we as Africans take into consideration the fact that God is circular, the circularity of God, when we take into consideration that that circularity has a center point, we may see our own solar system. Our own solar system has the center point as the sun, which is Ra, which is the center of Neter, all that is. And around this, our continent or our planet revolves, as do other planets within the solar system revolve. So this revolution is God. And therefore, that's why we may see God as Atum Ra, as Ra, not because the sun itself is God, but because the concept or the experience of God exists in the circularity of the center point with that which is revolving around it, because that is how Neter manifests in all creation, including in our inner cells, within our inner bodies. And so we've spoken before about how in Kemet we have many different cosmologies, but let's speak about the Anu, or the cosmology from Heliopolis. Helio meaning sun. So there, that is where they studied Ra as a cosmology. And what we know is, yes, the God is Atum Ra, the one who we've said is both no thing, because nothing exists, yet it has consciousness and will, and energy and matter that may be able to create Ra. And from this, it creates Shu and Tefnut, two equal and opposite energies. This equal and opposite energy is an aspect of what God is as Africans. It creates the one which is all manifest and the one which is primordial. So Geb and Nut. Geb, which is all manifest, it is what we can touch, see, think, feel. And Nut, which is the primordial, where Nun is, as we often know that they are depicted as Nut towering over Geb as one complementarity between each other. So God may be a duality, a complementarity, as we see with Shu and Tefnut, or even Atum and Ra, or Geb and Nut. And then within this particular cosmology, God gives birth, and God gives birth to other God beings, such as Nedhet, the principle of vision, such as Oser, the principle of the self, such as Oset, the principle of nurturing in the mother, or even Set, as we know it, the principle of destruction. All of this is God. God comes in many forms. God has many personalities. God has many Muntu, has many Kintu, has many Hantu, and has many Kuntu. All of this is an aspect of what we as Africans know as God. I'd like to go into another aspect of God. We've said that God is a circle. God has a circularity, and this circularity is shown to us in what and how our ancestors depicted Neter, because they know that everything revolves around a center point, and this is what we as Africans know as God. But God is also a triangularity, and this I'll go into more detail, following on from what we did last week when we spoke about education. The triangle, as we have gone into before, is actually the most stable geometric shape. So God also has a geometry. If we apply a force, as we can see here, upon a triangle, it will maintain its shape, especially if it is an equilateral triangle, because it has hinged corners and it has got equal angles within the corners. But a square, on the other hand, if we place a force upon it, will cause it to shear. So it is an unstable geometric shape. When a force is applied, it distorts. And so when we as Africans speak about God, we also speak about the triangularity of God, because the triangle, as we know from physics, or even basic physics and basic mathematics, is an extremely stable shape. And this is why our ancestors built pyramids, because they were just showing another aspect of God, that inasmuch as God is a circularity, as we see in all our homes, our indigenous homes here in the South, so too is God a triangularity. And this is what our ancestors wanted to show as they were building the pyramids, as they were showing us that God has another aspect. And the fact that God has a triangular aspect and a circular aspect does not make it mutually exclusive. God is all and, is both and, not either or, which is what our Western counterparts would like to believe, that we always must discount something else in order to account for something. So that's why our ancestors built pyramids, because they were actually just building God. And this here, which is the Great Pyramid of Giza, is one of the greatest attributes of the triangularity of God. When you enter this, you experience the fullness of what God is. You experience that there's a king's chamber, because it is understood that God has a masculinity within the triangularity. We experience the queen's chamber, because we understand that God has a femininity within the triangularity. But we also experience the subterranean chamber. The subterranean chamber is the place where there's infinite potential that can be birthed from the king and the queen coming together in union in order to create what may be birthed in this infinite potential. So our ancestors, in wanting to show us who or what God is, built pyramids. Or here in the South, they built round structures, such as Inzala Yolanga, because all of that showed us what and how God manifests. Not something that we have to believe that's far away in a heaven that we do not know, or in a limbo that we do not know, but something that we can touch, we can see, we can feel, we can think, we can smell, we can taste, we can sense. All of this is what God is. So let me go further into the triangularity of God. What is it that how God manifests as a triangle, and why does God manifest as a triangle? We have said that the triangle is the most stable shape, the stable geometric shape, both physically, in physical touching reality, as well as metaphorically, as well as cosmologically. A triangle is a very stable shape. So it is not surprising then that God, as broken down in the science of spirituality of our ancient ancestors, would have been broken down as triangles in the tree of life. So where our ancestors could have taken the shape of a tree as we know it, instead they put together a series of triangles in order to illustrate what or how God is. Now here I'm drawing on another cosmology. Just before I draw on the Heliopolis cosmology, or the cosmology of Anu, but now I'm going into this Osirian cosmology. And in Kemet, it didn't matter which cosmology you followed. All things led to the same, because everything is encapsulated in Neter. But this particular cosmology allows us to inhabit or to know what it is that exhibits the triangularity of God. Before that, let me just go into who or what the various attributes or archetypes are within this particular tree of life. At the top here, we see what we have. It looks like some chevrons. And chevrons are a particular shape that you'll often see perhaps in Baba Credo Mutwa's iconographs. But if you look into various petroglyphs that our ancestors drew, or even if you go, for instance, into the great Zimbabwe, into what have now become ruins following the destructions of colonialism, you'll see that the chevron shape is put there all the time. Why is this? Because the chevron shape illustrates, some will say water, but not necessarily water as we know it, as that substance that's made of hydrogen and oxygen combined, but water as the primordial space, the space of no thing, the space of Amun, the space of Amen, the space of Atem, the space of Atum. In the other cosmology, that is the space where Atum then becomes Ra. So in the beginning, there is this 0 point. And this 0 point is what we know as Amen. Amen is the hidden. Amen is the unmanifest. Amen is what Baba Credo is speaking about when he speaks about the lamp of peace. Amen is the place of all peace, because there is no thing. Therefore, if there's no thing, there's no reason for any contradiction. If there's no reason for contradiction, there's no reason for conflict. If there's no reason for conflict, then all that exists is peace. And therefore, we know from Africa that our original void is the Nun, the primordial space, is where God originates from. In this place, there's consciousness and will. It is conscious that it is conscious. It is conscious that it can will. And then it is conscious that when it wills, it can will through energy and matter. And with that energy, so it can will with energy, and that energy then produces matter. And that becomes the transduction sequence from the immanent or the non-manifest to the completely manifest. So then this singularity, this void, the 0 point, then wills itself into existence, because, for lack of a better word, it gets bored of just eternal peace. And so it wants to know itself. And because it wants to know itself, it wills, because it has the principle of will, it wills itself into the deity that we know as Osir, the archetype that we know as Osir. And this archetype exists as the unity. And this unity is what we call the omnipresence, because it exists everywhere. It is one with everything. It is, as when we spoke about the chemistry of the universe, it is the hydrogen of all that is. And this Osir is the self, the divine self. It is the God. But because it is omnipresent, it exists everywhere, it is one with everything, it also doesn't have contradiction. And so it is not able to know itself, because it has nothing to mark itself against. And so it wills itself into two properties, Tehuti and Sekert. Tehuti is the principle of divine wisdom, and Sekert is the principle of divine power. And this, as you will see, is a triangle, the triangularity of God. This divine wisdom is what we call the omniscience of God. And this divine power is what we call the omnipotence of God. And so this triune, this triangularity of omnipresence, omniscience, and omnipotence existed long before it was rendered into Christianity as a principle that describes God. It existed long before in our ancestors, and also here in the South, as we always see our deities tending to put themselves into triangles, into triunes, into triangularity. So this we call the Ba level of consciousness. This is the Ba level of God. This is the most supreme aspect of God. This is the aspect of God which is responsible for all of creation. So when we speak about God, the creator, as the triangularity of God, we're actually speaking about these three deities, Osir, Tehuti, or Jehuti as sometimes is known, and Sekert, which is the principle of creation. These three in the Ba level of consciousness then transduct through what we call here, it is the abyss of nothingness, and they create Ma'at. Ma'at is the divine law upon which everything exists. Ma'at is the divine law which renders itself as truth and which renders itself as love. Truth and love are the divine laws upon which all of creation exists. And they get this from Sekhet, who is the power that creates, and Tehuti, who is the wisdom that informs the truth that is Ma'at. So this is how we as Africans see the beginning of creation when we speak about God, the creator. From here, we have the divine law, which is Ma'at, love and truth and harmony. But it needs to be protected. So this God that is able to will itself into consciousness and will, which is into energy that creates matter, wills itself into Herkuti. Herkuti is the warrior. And this warrior has one responsibility and one responsibility only, to protect Ma'at. We may know of this energy as in other terms. We may know of this energy, for instance, as Sekhmet, as the one who does everything possible to protect Ma'at, to protect that which has been created by Ra. So this Herkuti serves one purpose only, to protect Ma'at. And then now we have divine law. We've got a protector of divine law, but we need a third one because God is triangular. And therefore it wills itself into Heru. And Heru becomes the circumspect one. We've often spoken about circumspection, which is the ability to see things in segregation, in congregation, in synthesis and analysis. All of this is Heru, the one who comes forth from night into day, the one who has Pert Em Heru, who becomes enlightened, the one who battles Set, who becomes blind, from being naive, becomes blind, and then becomes enlightened and has insight in order to be able to restore Ma'at from the clutches of Set, his uncle. And so what we have here is another triangle. And this triangle that we see, because God is triangular, according to our African paradigm, this triangle is what we call the Ab level of consciousness. And the Ab level of consciousness, Ab means heart in our Kemetic language. And so the heart is where all of governance sits. So in our ancient ancestors, when they were conceiving how governance or how government or how leadership would exist, they would always draw from these three principles. They would draw from the principle of Ma'at, they would draw from the principle of the warrior who protects Ma'at, and they would draw from the leader that is inherent in Heru, the one who sits in the solar plexus, just below our diaphragm, the one who governs our will, who governs choice, and who governs freedom to choose. So this is what we call our celestial government, the ones who are responsible for ensuring that the laws of Neter, who comes in from Amen, are materialized. And then from there, we then, this deity, this will, this God being wills itself. It says, what is the point of having a governance structure if it has got nothing to govern? And therefore it wills itself into the third triangle, or the third triangularity, which is Het Heru, Sebek, and Oset. Het Heru is the principle of imagination, the principle of vision and joy, the principle who is governed by Sekhet, which is creation, and therefore brings forth creativity, which brings Ma'at into manifestation. And this cannot be possible if there isn't one who is able to be a messenger from Tehuti, from the divine wisdom, which is Sebek, which is the one who communicates, and Pu, as is also known, the one who opens all the ways, the one who's also the embalmer, all of this encapsulated in this particular archetypal energy called Sebek. And then finally it manifests into our great mother, or Set, the one who carries everything, the one who conceives everything, the one who actually is what we call the Lordess of the words of power, where Sekhet governs, where Sekhet here governs cycles and words of power. The one who manifests them is Oset, and we'll talk into what she does with those words of power a bit later. She's the mother who births Heru. And so here we see another triangle. We see the mother, the son, and the father. And so this here is another trinity, which is formed as the triangularity that is God. And so all of these, which we call the subjective realm of God, then births what we know as Geb, which is the world and reality as we know it. Geb is the fullness of that which we know. Geb is the manifest. Geb is reality as we know it. Geb is that which you can see, touch, think, and feel as well. It also includes psychic energy. It also includes all our ancestors and all the spirits that exist upon this particular planet and throughout the cosmos. And in all of this, we see what is the triangularity of God. God is actually geometric. And in this geometry, God is scientific. So God exists as this no thing, as Amen, which exists as we see the chevron shape, this triangular shape, as we'll see. And what it does is it transduces, it has a transduction sequence going from Oser to Tehuti to Sekret to Ma'at to Herikuti to Heru to Heteru to Sebek to Oset. So as you can see, this triangularity all the way into Geb. This is what we call the transduction sequence. And this is how God seeks to experience itself, because it wants to know itself as something other than itself. And once it does this, our purpose as humans is to go back upwards, this transduction sequence from the Geb that we are into Oset, the nurturer, to Sebek, the communicator, to Heteru, the envisioned one, to Heru, the leader, to Herikuti, the warrior, the protector, to Ma'at, the bringer of truth and love, to Sekret, divine power, the omnipotent one, to Tehuti, the divine wisdom, the omniscient one, to Oser, which is then we say Anuk Oser, and then we then go back into the all that is, the Atum, the Amen, the Amun. And this is what we say when we talk about Amun Ra. God is actually a process. It's a location. It's a consciousness. It's a movement. It's a transduction sequence. That is what God is, according to us as Africans. So as we've said, God is omnipresent, sitting at Oser. God is omniscient, sitting at Tehuti. And God is omnipotent, sitting at Sekret. And all of this is what we as Africans know the Godhead to be. Now, there are some other aspects of God which I'd like to point out, which is that God exists in different divisions as well. And these divisions we know on our body as what we may call the chakras, which is the energetic points on our body, be it the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. Now, in our ancient Kemetic ancestors, they'll tell us that the root is the part of the body of God that is called the Kab, the most manifest aspect of God. They'll tell us that our sacral chakra represents the aspect of God that is electromagnetic, the Kaibet, that electromagnetic energy that we may feel, that helps us to influence things, but that we may not actually be able to see unless we have special devices, both Western scientific devices and our inner wisdoms to see. Then it tells us that Sahu is our next division of the spirit, which is governed by the solar plexus. And Sahu is what we may call the masses, that which is governed. We've spoken about the Ab division of the consciousness, which is the heart, the governing part. And then where the omnipotence sits is Shechem, that is where divine power sits. Where omniscience sits is Ku, which is where divine wisdom sits. And where the Godhead sits is where Ba is, where Oser sits. And these are rendered also in our Bantu cosmology, where Kab, or the root, is Umhlaba, where sacral or Kaibet is Itunzi, where the solar plexus is governed by Amandla, where the heart is Utiwe Silo, where the throat or Shechem is Utiwe Muntu, where the third eye or Ku is Utiwe Tongo, and where the crown is Utongo. And this is how God manifests as the divisions of the spirit. 7, as we know, is a sacred number. And now we're seeing why 7 is such a sacred number, because 7 is the number that governs Oser, that governs God. So we have seen that God is a triangularity. And if God is a triangularity, then it means that 1 is 3. But it also means that 3 is in 1. So God is the 1 in 3 and the 3 in 1. And when we speak about the Trinity, that is God, we are speaking about the triangularity that we as Africans know as God. But we talk about God as the tree of life. And we have shown the tree of life as a scientific transduction sequence. But the baobab is a classic example of what we mean when we talk about God as the tree of life. We know that beneath here, there are deep, deep roots that go deep into the core of the earth. That is the one aspect of God, the one that is rooted into the core. We know that we have the trunk here, which is where everything moves. Everything from the depths of the core of the earth moves into the branches, which create roots that are on the outside. So this 3-in-1 is what we as Africans know as God in the tree of life, which may be rendered as the triangles that we saw in our previous examples. So the baobab, as we know it, with its roots above and roots below, as above, so below, is the epitome of God here on the planet that we may be able to see, because it transports from the core to the realms of the ancestors, to the realms of the infinite ones, to the realms of Neter. So how do we experience God as opposed to experience God? We then go into the Immaculate Conception, and we have often told the story of Osar and Oset, where we know that Osar and Oset were the great healers and rulers of Kemet. And then Set, the brother of Osar and Oset, got jealous. He asked his brother, he cut him up into 14 pieces, cast them to the ends of the earth, in order to take up the throne, descending everything into chaos. We know that Oset took her sister Nebtet, and they went out to the ends of the earth and found 13 pieces of Osir, which they remembered, brought back together. And then Oset, being the lordess of the words of power, drew from Sekret, the one who creates power. And with this, she had incantations that enabled her to create a phallus in order to impregnate herself without a phallus or a real phallus, impregnate herself in order to create Heru, to conceive Heru, which she gives to her sister as Nebtet to carry as a surrogate. But this is what the original Immaculate Conception is, as was rendered by our ancestors, our African ancestors. This ability for the God the Father, God the Mother, to create and procreate and conceive the aspect of the will that we know as Heru. So our original deity, or our original Trinity, as we know it, is the Trinity between Osar, Oset, and Heru, which we have already seen on the Kemetic tree of life. And this is how nature, or Neter, personifies itself as this Trinity, which we as Africans know. And we know that Heru, who is the one who's created by Osar and Oset, often is in harmony with Ra, because he is governed by the sun. The sun, as we know, being the center point of Neter, as we have seen it, the center point of our particular solar system, where we have the revolution, or which goes around it, the circularity of God. So in this, the circle becomes the triangle, and the triangle becomes the circle. And the triangulated circle is what we as Africans know to be the original Trinity that is God as we know it. And then we know as Africans that God is as much the mother, as God is the father, and as God is the child. God is not just Father God, as the Western religion has sought to patriarchalize God and remove the mother. But God is as much the mother as God is the father, as the child, because we only have to look into nature to know that all nature is created by the feminine, the masculine coming together into procreative space in order to birth the future generation. And finally, we are God, because all that I have explained right now, the circularity, we experience the circularity within us. The triangularity, we experience the triangularity within us, as I've shown that the chakras of the body, which are just manifestations of God, are actually an aspect of God. So therefore, we are God in as much as a teaspoon of seawater is to the ocean. The only difference between us and the experience of God is the magnitude. But we carry every single attribute that God has,
because as we've seen from the transduction sequence, God wills itself into Geb, which we become, and then we then re-will ourselves back into Amen, into the nothingness. So we are simply a teaspoon of seawater as much as God is to who we are. So for that, we just need to source the source and know that we are the source. We are God. And because we are God, we can say, Anuk Oser, I am God. God is me, and God is in me. Ashe.
Thokoza gogo. Bonge kakhulu Ndlovukazi, Ndlovukazi. Siyabonga gogo. Yes gogo. I just want to reaffirm the concept that is known here in the South. When you talk about Nun, you know where Ra comes from. In our context here in the South, situ kulu kuluan, you know, the energy that and the spirit that engulfs the whole universe. So when you talk about the principle of Ra, you're talking about the principle that we know as Umvelingan, Uqamata, Uramasedi, the bringer of light, before any other creation. So we really, really appreciate, you know, the lecture, Gogo, and you know, just to emphasize the point that Africans were never confused about, you know, what the Creator is, which is why the emphasis, you know, to know thyself, because knowing yourself, you are knowing God, because you are God. But, you know, the energy that is keeping everything together is that energy of Umvelingan, you know, the sun. So the sun and the moon, these are two cosmic bodies that are responsible for everything. Remember what I said, you know, last, that the moon doesn't generate the energy, but the sun generates the energy, meaning you can, you know, compare the sun as the ESCOM. It generates the energy, but the moon controls the energy, you know, meaning that in the African context, you can never go to the father without passing, you know, the mother. So the mother principle is the important principle, you know, on earth. This is the principle that distributes the energy that the sun, you know, creates. And also it controls, you know, the water. Almost, you know, 70% of our bodies, you know, are water, and the 7% of our universe is water. So when you talk about the concept of as above, so below, as, you know, within, as without, you are talking about that concept. So Okhokho bethu knew about this, because when you say, you know, Kamata Umvelinqangi, you're talking about the first cause before any other creation. This is the principle that created, you know, things or anything that manifested here on earth. And that principle, Umvelinqangi, Ilanga. I hope today, from today, there won't be, you know, any confusion about who God is. As Ukoko explained about, you know, the circle and the triangle, as, you know, those representing, you know, the Creator, you know, principle. So I hope you guys, you know, you've cleared that, because I'm always, you know, worried about, you know, African people when they are confused about who the Creator is. And yet, Okokobe, to just lay it down for us, all we have to do is to go back, you know, embrace the spirit of Sankofa, where we go back and take everything that we will need in creating the future. Gogo, we thank you so much. We appreciate And I'm hoping, Mkhulu Mhleli, that, sometime next week, no Gogo, we can talk about the principle that we are in now, or the principle that govern the season that we are in, which is the principle of Ma'at. Ma'at, remember, Ukoko always says that Ma'at remembers everything that was destroyed by Seth, just to put all the pieces together to actually form, the Netta again, that unity of all the members that were scattered. We really, really appreciate Gogo. Thokoza, siyabonga kakhulu Ndlovukazi. Ndlovukazi.
We give thanks, Mkhulu.
Okay, Mkhulu Mhleli, ungasho ukuthi senze njani?
Thokoza Gogo. I have a question from one of our viewers. Uti, I wish to know more about the 7 divisions, the ones that the principles which Gogo Tendo just explained. I think he would like to know more in detail, the 7 divisions of the spirit. Would you be able to please elaborate on that?
Is that for me, Mkhulu, or for Mkhulu?
Ngicela ukuyishiya kunina abantu abadala.
Oh no, ngachaza nje nami. Ukuthi these 7 division of spirit. Ugogo is talking about the energy centers in our bodies that are responsible for the functioning of certain organs in our system that makes us alive. Because if a certain chakra is blocked there, or that energy center, it will affect all the organs that are connected to that to that. So Ugogo is talking about those energy centers ezikhona la kithi. And Ubabu Credo articulated as umbilini, umbilini, that energy that runs through our system, that energy that is also the nurse or the great hospital, within ourselves. Because knowing how to deal with these chakras, you can automatically heal yourself. But now, because of our consciousness is no longer there, that is why we will need the hospital. Our ancestors knew how to heal the liver, from that energy that runs, within umbilini. So it is the healing power, that energy of Sekhmet, heals everything in our system. That is why we do what we do, so that, in future, this thing could be approached as a collective of African people truly practicing their spirituality, taking care of that, that balance that Ma'at needs, so that everything that we consume, everything that we do, it must add the power to that energy of Sekhmet, so that the body can heal itself. We can't always depend, on the external help that we get from hospitals. Remember that the spirit has created the physicality that we call the body. So the spirit has the potential and the ability to heal the very same body that it has, created. So our consciousness, it was diverted into everything that is physical, which, talks about this Western education that I always talk about, that it is limited. Because for everything that is, there is a principle which is intangible. You can't touch, you can't feel, but it's there. It's responsible for your liver, meaning that there is a spiritual liver before there's a physical liver in your system. So that's my take, Coco. Maybe you can add some more.
Thank you so much, Mkhulu. Thank you so much for that. I think just drawing, further from what Mkhulu has said, what we experience on our bodies then further becomes manifest. We know one of our laws is as above, so below. So in as much as we've got energy centers in our particular body, each of these energy centers are aligned with particular aspects of God or particular aspects of the Supreme, starting with the root, which is aligned with what we call the cub, which is the most manifest aspect of who we are. And this most manifest aspect of who we are, according to our Kemetic ancestors, is known as cub. But we may know it as umhlaba here, in the south. It is the root. It is the ground upon which we walk. And this ground upon which we walk is aligned to our root chakra, which exists on our bodies. And then our sacral chakra, the sacral chakra is just...
Sorry, Gogo, before you proceed, I would like to just clarify that this, gap you're talking about, it's also our physical body, because we are everything that as is. So abantu mustn't be confused there. When you're talking about gap, you're talking about everything that has manifested, including our physical body. Thank you, Gogo.
Absolutely, Mkhulu. Absolutely, Mkhulu. And that is what we're speaking about when we speak about the cub and we speak about, the umhlaba, here. And but which also includes, Geb also includes what we call the kaibet, which is the electromagnetic energy that flows around us. So we know that we speak of an aura because it's Ra energy, but we also, as a chakra, but we also speak about the aura, which we know we've got an energetic field, electromagnetic field around us, and I'm sure every one of us has been shocked at some point or the other when they've touched a static, material or something where there's a bit of static, because we have that electromagnetic energy. But that electromagnetic energy is not just physical energy. That electromagnetic energy is also the energy that we use to influence particular activities or are influenced by particular activities. So even when we speak, for instance, of something like witchcraft, for example, when somebody, you say that they have sent lightning to you, it is the kaibet through which the electromagnetic energy that this energy moves towards. We know that sometimes we can impact somebody with our thoughts. We know that we can influence things with the way, just about thinking about something, we can influence that. That travels through this electromagnetic energy called the kaibet, which we know as here as isitunzi. And then the solar plexus on the body exists just below the diaphragm, just below the diaphragm where the stomach is, and this is where the sun is. It's the sun of the body, the sun of the body. And that's what I call solar plexus. And this is where the Sahu level of consciousness sits when we talk about the Sahu division of the spirit, which is the masses that are governed by the celestial government that we spoke about earlier. And this Sahu, which sits where the sun is on our bodies, is a mandla because we get energy from the sun, so that is sitting at the solar plexus. And then we have at the heart chakra, just in the middle of our chest, which is aligned with what we call the Ab level of consciousness, or the Ab vision of the spirit. And this heart level is what we here will call Utivasilo, which is the division of the spirit that's where my eye sits, that's where the root sits, and that's where it sits, which is the divine law. And all of that which is governed by love. And that's the Ab division of the spirit. So we're going up in hierarchy, then to the Shechem, which sits in the throat chakra. And Shechem is power. Shechem actually means power, according to our ancient ancestors. It sounds like is my sound not good? Has my sound distorted?
Yes, there's a little bit of a distortion.
Okay, let me try and...
But you are audible now, Coco.
Is the sound better?
Much better, Coco.
Okay. Thank you. So we spoke about the Shechem, which is the power, which sits in the body. It sits in the throat chakra. So just if you think about just in the middle of your throat, and that is aligned with what our ancestors will tell you is where the seat of power, because it's the power that comes through our ability to communicate. And our ancestors here will call that Utiwe Muntu. And then what they call the third eye, which is where wisdom sits, which is, this is just on the brow in the middle of the forehead, is where our ancestors told us this is where the Ku division of the spirit sits, the ability for us to align with the divine knower, the knowing aspect of the spirit. And this is what our ancestors here would have called Utiwe Tongo. And then finally, our crown chakra is at the top of our head. This is where the Ba level of consciousness is, the level of consciousness that is aligned with Oser, which is aligned with Ra, which is aligned with Atum, which is aligned with Amen, Amun. And this is what our ancestors will tell us is where Utongo says, the Ba level of consciousness. So these 7 divisions of the spirit are actually aligned even on our bodies, as much as they're aligned in the universality of who or what God or Neter, as we know it is. So I hope that just builds up a bit more on what Mkhulu was explaining. But we are as above, so below. We are as God is to the ocean. We are as a teaspoon of seawater.
Oh, thank you so much, Coco. And just to, bring this other aspect as well, that, these chakras are also linked to certain planets, in our cosmos that are responsible, for them. So we draw the energy of the chakras from some of, these planets called the inner planets that affects everything, in our universe. So I truly appreciate the lecture. And, I hope as we go along, the consciousness, of our African, people all over the world. Remember that when we talk about, African people, the reason our focus is about African people, it's because these are the group of people, that have been lied to for several, decades, as much as, the promotion of disinformation about who we are as Africans. So these are the efforts that are, here to assist Africans as they reconnect with that African spirit, that African energy we need to build, the new Africa that we need and we want. So we are just setting the foundation for all that, so that Africans, align with that consciousness, because that is the consciousness that is demanded, by our ancestry, and the consciousness that we need, to take, Africa, forward. Don't come and tell us, about everything that you have learned from the West. The West can never give you anything that will actually make you strong and powerful again, because with that knowledge, our ancestors ruled the world. So this is the knowledge we're trying to promote, to say Africa, if they were to reconnect with this knowledge, we can even surpass what our ancestors did, all over here in Zaloelanga, the Great Pyramid of Giza. We can do much more, and it is our obligation as African people, to surpass our ancestors. We can't go below, as you've noticed, or people who have researched this content, everything that is done by, the Westerners, you find that, our African ancestors knew about it a long time. It's just a different packaging that is being used, especially to confuse you as African, to keep you in this condition that they want you to be in. So it's time to unlock, those shackles, so that we are free mentally, so that our physicality could also follow, our mentality and our spirituality inside, a free soul, a free spirit to fully, express or give, that spiritual energy full expression, so that, you unlock or you release your ancestors, because the more you perpetuate this, slave mentality, colonization of the mind, we are further imprisoning your ancestors. So, it's up to us as Africans to be serious about this, because it involves and affects generations to come. We must, cut this generational curse of self-preservation and think about, the future. We should be planning for 100 to 200 years to come as to where we want to be. So that is why we are putting this foundation. I would like to thank everybody that was involved, Royal Mhleli, Royal Bandile, Royal Mukhati, and everybody that is responsible to make this thing happen. And we truly appreciate your time and contribution, Gogo, in re-educating Africans about who they are and where we need to be and how to actually get there. It's very important, Uguti, here in the GEK, we have been given the future as to how the future should be and how to get there. That is why we do what we are doing. Art.
Mkhulu, ngaphambi kokuthi sihambe, just for Gogo Rutendo quickly, there's a question that asks whether there are 7 chakras only, and how does one activate one's chakras?
Thank you so much for that question. No, there aren't 7 chakras only. There are 7 base chakras, and which you can find in very specific areas upon the body. But we have other chakras, another 7 chakras, for example, 7 higher chakras, over and above, the chakras which are more base and which we are more familiar with, especially if we go into other cosmology such as the Vedic cosmology. But in order to activate, and Baba Credo will talk about it as Umbilini, I think we've often seen on if we see the pharaohs, in Kemet, is that they have a python, or a cobra rather, that is the Uraeus that is, coming through from the crown chakra just above which would be the brow chakra. So that is what Umkhulu Credo speaks about as Umbilini. Imagine it's a serpent that is coiled 3.5 times at the base of the spine. And when we activate, and I'll talk about ways that we can activate our life force, our Ra, or our Chi, or our Num, as our Khoisan or Bushman ancestors call it, then it rises up, our spine system, coming up as what is depicted as a serpent, in Kemet. And even if you go to other cosmologies, you'll often see, even if you look at, for instance, the Caduceus that the medics use, they have a serpent, which illustrates this movement of energy up, the different levels of energy, the different energy centers. Now, how do we activate that? There are 5 basic principles that our ancestors told us. It is how you eat. It is how you sleep. It is how you drink. It is how you breathe. It is how you exercise. All of this is absolutely critical to how it is that we're able to manage our life force, whether it is through what we may term the chakra system, or whether it is what we may call the meridians, or however it is Umbilini, however it is Kundalini, however it is termed. All of this is activated by those 5 base principles: eat well, drink well, sleep well, exercise well, breathe well. And there are all sorts of, I won't go into it today, there are all sorts of types of exercises that are relevant for activating the life force. And we even know, for instance, that here in the South, those who are called into the gift of Sangoma, they Gida, and that Gida activates the life force, because you're activating particular energy centers, and that energy center uncoils that serpent. from the base of the spine, moving it up, shooting it up the spine, into your higher consciousness, where you're able to access either the ab or the ba level of consciousness, and then enter into the eternal realms, in order to access, what it is that the ancient future ones, ancestors are saying. So the science of activating the life force, or activating the chakras, or activating the energy centers, we know that all the sciences that have gone out to the rest of the world started here in Africa. So if we look at what is known in China, they call it Qi Gong. Qi is the life force, is the Ra. Gong means to cultivate. So it's particular exercises that are particularly aimed at activating the different life force. There's certain, breathing exercises, just such as alternate nostril breathing, which allow you to activate the different, meridians or energy centers or energy channels or the rivers that flow through the body. All of these are techniques which our African ancestors performed. If you look on the temples in Kemet, you will see that they were performing all of these activities as a way of rousing the life force. Unfortunately, we've become a fast food nation thanks to lockdown. That's been clamped down a bit. But we've become fast fooders. We don't exercise well. We're in our cars all the time, or in taxis, and we're not living the lifestyles that our ancestors did, because they knew that as above, so below, as within, so without. So I need to work on my body in order to work on my spirit. And when all of those are aligned, then I'm activated, and then I am in my full ma'at, and I'm able to truly access God and say, Anuk Oser, I am God.
Thokoza Gogo. I thank you for the explanation. I just would like to touch on a question here, and I think that it possibly relates to the Immaculate Conception, but just to help our royals also understand, because the question is, where does Jesus fit into the equation? And I think that in the context, in the Kemetic context, perhaps just to clarify on that, so that our royals can also understand what are we talking about.
Thank you so much for that question. I really hope and pray that at some point we'll be able to have a replay of a great musical play that Ubaba Credo Mutwa wrote in the early 70s, which was recast by Wits Drama School last year, called Uno Silimela. And in this, Ubaba Credo shows in detail, who or what Jesus is, and what, for instance, Mary is, and how this fits into our African paradigm. When we look at the story of the Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which is what we see in the Christianized Trinity, or maybe they said the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we'll realize, firstly, we know that in terms of timeline, Christianity is less than 2,000 years old. And when we're talking about Trinity in our Kemetic system, we're talking thousands of years, and predating, at least 2,000 to 3,000 years predating the beginning of Christianity. And we will often see, if we go to cathedrals, or even any churches, actually most Catholic churches will have a picture of Mother Mary holding a baby that she's breastfeeding. We only have to go to our Kemetic temples to see that this is all set in our Kemetic, cosmology, and she's holding Heru. So who or what is Heru in Christianity? That's where Jesus, was borrowed from, or Jesus borrowed from Heru. So the Immaculate Conception, where, amongst the Catholics, immaculate, they have made it into something called a virgin birth, which immaculate, if we go into Catholic theology, actually just means pure. You know, it means pure. It doesn't mean that there was no copulation that took place. But because the church sought to cut out aspects of nature, copulation is an aspect of nature. It's a natural aspect of nature, but everything does. Procreation happens everywhere. Nothing exists in the world without procreation. And that the church sought to cut this out, and therefore they also cut out the woman, and in this particular Trinity, which is just the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So, but we also find that Heru renders itself in other religions as well as the Buddha, in Buddhism. So Heru has found its way into other religions, but the most the most obvious one is in Christianity. Jesus is just a copycat of Heru.
Thokoza gogo, siyabonga kakhulu, for that explanation. And just to say to people that, what we are talking about spiritual principles. These principles are there, like the concept, of Jesus. Remember that our spirituality talks about Jesus, not Jesus, but it talks about Heru. And these are energies that have manifested on earth. I'll make an example. You'll find that, when you talk about, Set, you're talking about the energy or the element, that sometimes can be referred to as carbon dioxide, which then, disturbs the natural flow of oxygen, because we live by oxygen. Without oxygen, there's no life. So these are spiritual, concepts. Yingakho ngithi abelungu, they've removed us from everything that is spiritual, basibeka enyameni. Even the representation of the Creator itself, they moved us, consciously from that which is natural, to an image that they created themselves, which looked like the Westerners or white people, in order, as a social control, instrument or mechanism, so that, we are kept in the condition. So what I wanted to emphasize is that, when you talk about Asa or Set, you're talking about principles that are there, prevalent in the universe, not sometimes, people, that might have lived here on earth. We're talking about amadlozi, not amatongo. Idlozi, these are eternal principles that are there, and they are responsible for every manifestation that is on earth. And the itongo, these are, spirits or imimoya that have experienced, a gap, which is a physicality. So they once lived, but now they are no more. I think that might help in terms of clarifying that point. Thokoza mkhulu.
Thank you, Mkhulu. Indeed, we've also had that discussion even in the group reading session as to the difference between idlozi netongo. I thank you for the clarification, because I think it is important that we grasp from the elders such as yourself, ukuthi umehluko ukuphi, so that nathi sizokwazi ukuthola lolu lwazi. We were indeed grateful for that, Mkhulu.
Thokoza, okay.
Angazi Mkhulu, mina sengiqedile ngama questions on my side. I hope our royals definitely have had their answers, or rather their questions answered, which is very, very helpful. And we are indeed trying. All your questions are very important to us royals. So we hope ukuthi niphendulekile. Those questions perhaps that might not have been answered. We are still willing. You can go onto the Facebook page, continue to ask, and let's see how we can try and respond to those questions. Be that as it may, ngicela ukunikhumbuza ma-royals, the ancestral prayer book is available. Here it is. This book is available at gek.empire at gmail.com. So the email address, please email your order to gek.empire@gmail.com. gek.empire@gmail.com. And please specify, leave us your address as well if you wish us to courier the book to you. But remember, royals, that the courier will be for your own cost. Otherwise, you can pick up this book at 150. It's good, really. You pay 150 and this book is yours. This will indeed help you to go through the seasons and the prayers, the liturgies, the litanies of the season. So please, here's this book. It is very helpful.
Just to add, Ryan Shelley,
Yes.
Uguti, there is an electronic copy of the calendar as well.
Oh yes, Mkulu. An electronic calendar as well is available at 50 rands. Do get your copy as well, royals. It's in PDF format. Yes, ngizocela Mkulu, just my colleagues to now ukuthi aphefumule on today's topic. Tulani.
Sanbonani, thank you very much, Rutendo, Koko Rutendo, once more. I was busy taking notes here. Although some of the things were repeated the last 2-3 sessions, but it always sounds very new because it's something that has to be repeated over and over until it gets into our system. You did explain the God concept very well, and which is what I have in my own space been trying to explain to many people, that actually we need to redefine God as Abantu, and all that. And I'm also glad that some viewers also have noted that there has been Patlarism. The Abrahamic religions actually have Patlarized the Kemetic knowledge. They've stolen almost everything that is key, everything that is actually like the ingredient that works. They've stolen it, they've packaged it and resold it back to us. While we actually need to go to the original stuff, go back to the original, try and learn what we have been told not to learn, meaning we have to unlearn to learn. And then we then make a decision, which one is the Makoya? Probably that is why we're at the bottom of the social hierarchy, because we have been actually absorbing a Fong Kong kind of like belief system. So my recommendation after this lecture and many other lectures that Koko Rutendo and Mkulu have been giving us, let's go back to the Makoya stuff, learn about it, and we then try and refine or re-establish ourselves. Ngiyabonga.
Thokoza Mkulu, thank you so much for that. That is very important, to go back to the source. Yebo Mkulu. Mekhale.
Okay. Dumelang, firstly, I'd like to give thanks and praises to Ugok Rutendo. She never fails us and she makes us remember who we are. Firstly, we must understand that we are students, and please remain the teacher that you are. And this goes to Umkulu as well, providing us with a platform. We really appreciate you making us remember the foundation that we need to have with us, and that is the time that we are in. So that's very important. Then, Mhleli, I don't know if there's time because there's a lot to reflect about what Ugo Rutendo just said. You know, this concept of God, maybe I'll try to summarize. The minute we start describing our creator, Mupi Warona, Mveli Ngandi, with English, we've lost it already. The minute we start describing what is written and stored in our languages, how we describe Orubupileng. The minute we start saying God, this is how I was brought up by my grandparents. The minute you start saying I completely lose the connection. And I'll tell you why. Because some of the words that we use, they have so much meaning and they give you muthala wa who you're talking about, what you're talking about. Gogo Rutendo emphasized that point when she said, God, the concept of God means that it's something that is distant from you when you start speaking of it in English. And how we practiced we don't see ourselves distant from the creator because we are a continuous cycle of energy. So you can't, the minute you start to conceptualize something like Mkhulu Tulani said, in Islam, they have a person, Muhammad, and then you have Jesus, then you have, it's always conceptualized to a person. But when it comes to our beliefs as Tari Insu, we cannot take what we cannot see or even measure and put it in the power of a human being. We've never done that. We could never do that. And I really want to thank you, Gogo Rutendo. You know how you described God being a secular energy, triangular energy, a geometric energy. It came back to a point that, and I hope you don't mind, Mkhulu, I know you're sensitive with time, but if you just allow me to share this with you, with the royals. I hope you can see this. Please confirm to me, Mhleli.
Yes, Gogo, we can see, we can.
Okay, great. Now, I'd like to say something to you. So when the concept was given to me, I went back to the teachings that Gogo Rutendo shared with us. And also, it's always important to go back, the Sankofa teachings. Go back so that you can learn for the future, where you're going. So how we see Mupi, our creator, I'm going to try by all means to avoid the word God because it confuses me. It's all about spiritual science. So we have Sidimo Satari Insu, right? And if we take the principles that Gogo Rutendo keeps on telling to us is, as above, so is below. Spiritual science is a combination of spirit and rituals, hence the word spiritual. Forgive me for using that. I thought it would make sense to us because most of us speak this language, which we need to get away from as quick as possible. So you have rituals that our people, and as Gogo Rutendo said, we are completely attached to nature. Everything that we do, Hari Pasha, Hari Rapela, when we do our rituals, we always do it either using a tree, mobu, whatever, it's fine. It's always attached to some kind of element of nature. So rituals are important for us to go and connect with the spirit that is above. So that what you see in front of you there, it's also explaining what Gogo Rutendo explained to us in the previous presentations, that God has duality. You cannot separate chaos from order. The spirit that governs us, or energy that governs us, there's a very, very important connection between chaos and order. Hence, when you see at the top the lower, you would call,
Mechale, just to interrupt you, sorry. Did you mean to share a screen? Are you wanting to share something on the screen?
Yes.
Please do, so that the royals can see.
It?
No. I thought you were sharing the Ankh. But share what you wish to share so the royals can have.
Can you see it?
Yes. Beautiful.
Right. Wonderful. Thanks, Mkhulu Mhleli. I'm sorry about that. So what you see in front of you, effectively, okay, I've talked all through it, but we can share this with the royals when I'm done. There's a very strong relationship with the tree of life that Gogo Rutendo was telling us, and also the importance of understanding how we relate to Mupi Warona, and how we as a people, the chosen people, the original people, as Mkhulu always says to us, that we are the firstborns. This talks to that. And if you look at the left, at the right of this slide, you start seeing, this is very important, you start seeing the different types of hair strands that you would have in different types of people. The Asians will have a kind of a small line, a very straight line, then the Caucasians a bit curly, and then Afro, you have that coiled hair. Why am I showing you this? It's the importance of how we are manifested, how we are designed so that we are able to connect to the energy that is above us. If you look at the picture above it, you get different types of coils that are used in light bulbs so that you give a certain type of light, the potency and the power of light. As you can see, that the filament which is more coiled is the brightest. So what do you think this means? Those people who have coiled hair, as much as we've been made fun of, we are the brightest. You have the potential of understanding things and be more connected to God, excuse my word again, to the Mupi, our creator, than any other. There's a certain spiritual science and design that is within you that should not be taken for granted. It is in you, and that's why they say most of the power that is required for you to be spiritual, and that's why as those people who are African are highly spiritual, it is within you. You have the ability to be the most brightest out of all nations. It is within your DNA. So the picture that's beside it, when you have that kind of hair, which are natural light conductors, those who understand science and how electricity is generated, when you have a magnetic field around you, which is caused by how you connect to Badimu Bahao le Madimu Ahao, because a person must have Badimu le Madimu, and how you react and connect to Mudimu Lili Dimu Lahao, sends the right frequency to lower, which transcends the power down to you, onto or what you call the crown chakra. That energy then goes to what Mkhulu and Gogo were talking about, your chakras. That energy comes from somewhere, but it's a process. If you don't attach yourself and recognize Setu Sahao, by practicing and understanding Badimu Bahao, Le Madimu Ahao, you will not be able to connect to Mudimu Lili Dimu, which is duality of power, ya Lowe. And if Lowe is not informed by your existence, you will not be connected. You will not understand and see the powers that are written in all these books of magic. You can only retain and get that energy if you know who you are and what you are. And you can only do that if you practice Sankofa. Sankofa talks about going back to Badimu, those who lived and practiced what they did before. So it's all a connected system. We cannot give this to one. It's all a very complex but simple. And I like what Gogo Rutendo said. God, or yeah, in her words, God is a contradiction. There's nothing more true to that. You cannot encapsulate the power of creation to a person. So it's important that we do understand who we are and who the creator and what the creator is. It's everlasting, and we will never be able to encapsulate the power of the creator in this time. It's forever changing, just like the star system and the constellations that are above us. But anyway, I really appreciate the time. I don't want to go deep into into this because Goku Tendo and Mkhulu said what they had to say, and I appreciate it. I'll forever make notes and express how I see and how I'm going to evolve as the child of the Great Spirit. Thokozani Makhosi.
Thokoza, we thank you, Ndlovukazi.
Mkhulu Thulani.
Yebo. Yes. It will be great to actually have Mahali to give us this lecture. Because when you do it this fast, after we have just khabulad what Gogo Ritendo just gave us, our brain cells, they take time to actually absorb such wisdom. So we will appreciate you, Umamukhale Masmenya, as a plif tokhwana. Can you please, maybe one of the Sundays, give us that honor of, giving a lecture regarding our hair? Because, me, I've been actually fighting with a lot of people regarding the hair, the appreciation of natural hair, because you actually spoke exactly what I have been trying to allude to many people, but they are not actually getting it, that our hair is actually our aerial, our antenna to receive the energy from God. God is in nature, from the sun, from everything that is surrounding us. And now when they actually cover it up, and put something fake, there's a lack of understanding actually about the importance of hair. So Mahale, think about, Masmenya, think about it. Thokozani.
Thokoza.
Yeah, Thokoza.
Thokoza. Matwana. Maskeke.
Yebo, Kedla. Hayi, mina bengingaphakamisanga isandla. Thokozani Zindlondlo. It's been a minute. Mkhulu. It's been a minute. I just want to say thank you for the lecture once more, because every time when we sit here and listen to wisdom yaga Gogo Rutendo noMkhulu, siyakega, we are forever renewed every Sunday, and it made sense why AmaKrestu would set this day aside, because there's a new week coming, and so renewal is important. So siyabonga for these Sunday sessions. And njengoba uMamkhale naye uGogo Rutendo bakhulumile, thina sifundiswa ngesiboka kamla wabaSotho ke siboka, it's the khotla. So siboka abantu king madimu badimu limudimu, it's a cancel. So those are your people, and it's so amazing how Gogo Rutendo unpacked it. All of those things fell right into place with what is what in terms of our teachings. And so I'm going to go back also and ngihlanganisa diagram kanjalo, and so that it also makes sense from me as umntwana okhuliswe ngesisuthu nangesizulu ukuthi okay, so njengoba umkhulu bekathi amathongo nedlozi nani, all of that makes sense. So ngaphandle kokuthi ngimoshe sekwenziwe, ngicela ukubonga for these sessions again, and for everybody that keeps coming back for this platform. Siyanibonga nani, ningadinwa. Let's do the same thing again next week. Thokozani.
Thokoza Gogo, sibongile. Ndlovukazi. Mkhulu, ngicela ukubuyela kuwena. What a session. Yazi angazi nokuthi ngithini, ngibona ngathi ngizoyimosa uma ngengakhuluma emva kwalokho ngoba it's just so beautiful.
Gia.
And I think kubalulekile for royals to actually understand as well. When we talk about the God concept in the African context, now uGogo Rutendo went and talked about the Immaculate Conception a little bit. This is the Immaculate Conception involving Asar, Oset, and Heru. And from this Trinity, the Christians then formulated their Trinity. Now, I want you to understand this. The research that was done by Dr. Joseph Ben Jochannan actually places the Immaculate Conception of Kemet 4,000 years before the concept of Jesus. So you must understand what is older, what is the original. So we need to go back to the original. Let's leave the fakes alone. That's why I got my phone call. Now, original. Let's go back to the original. The floor is yours.
Oh, Thokozani ngicela nje sivale sithi ma-art.
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 Ramasedi.
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 Kamata.
Kamata.
Oset.
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 Heru.
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 Thokozani njani?
Thokoza mkhulu. Siyabonga Royals. Thokoza mkhulu. Royals, that is the end of our session. Yazi ukuthi ngendlela kumnandi ngayo, we don't even want to leave. But unfortunately sishawa isikhathi sesisishile. Ayike asifuna ukugeqa amagula bafowethu. Kukhona kuningi ukuphathelene nalolu lwazi. Sizophinda futhi next week. We are probably going to have a firework of a session when we talk about Ma-art, which is the season we are in. And why is Ma-art so important? How do we get to connect with the energy of Ma-art? We need to prepare for this one. It's going to be fireworks. So siyabonga for all the royals who joined. Thank you for your patience as well. We have some technical errors sometimes here and there. Kodwa siyazama makhosi, bear with us. But we appreciate your patience. And we thank you so much for viewing and tuning in. Also tune into the Facebook as we live stream. Siyabonga makhosi. Keep the questions coming in on Facebook and the comments. Asifundisane sifundeni sisonke. Thokozani Royals. Until next Sunday. Kusasa, by the way, we will be discussing education on this GEK platform because we want to understand how do we then get this education. We talked from a session last week about education. How do we take our children and teach them the way that they should be taught? How do we formulate an African-based curriculum? So we will be doing discussing these issues. So the GEK can actually start formulating a system where we can teach our children ourselves and teach our children in a better way until we are able to be in a situation where we can start formulating Kemetic spirituality schools. So join us tomorrow on 8 in Tambama, where we will have that discussion as well, so that we can start formulating. It's just conceptualizing this whole talk about taking our education into our own hands. So iqala lapho indaba, and as we plan, join us so that we can plan all together and move this vehicle forward. Once again, don't forget the ancestral book, the ancestral prayer book at 150 at Tolagala Goldweni, and also the electronic calendar at Tolagala at 50 rands a copy. Siyabonga makhosi, thokozani nonke. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Ma-art.
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 Thokozani Zindlondlo. Ngivale mkhulu.
Hayi singayivala. Hayi. Thokozini.
Makhosi namakhosikazi, makhosana namakhosazana. Asihlangane futhi ngesikhathi esifanayo next Sunday. We'll be discussing Ma-art. Thokozani.